I apply for training last year? How have you spent your F3 year? How do you go about doing an F3 year? How did you get time off to travel? Is it feasible to afford to go travelling after foundation years? What to do to start building my paediatrics portfolio? Hi everyone and welcome back to my YouTube channel. So I thought I'd come on here and do a bit of a catch up, a bit of an update Q&A video today, because I know I've been quite absent both over here on my YouTube and on my Instagram in the last few months, but really for the whole of my F3 year. So I put a question box over on my Instagram and I'm just going to be going through that and answering some of the questions, a lot of which were about my F3 year, about paediatrics, specialty training applications and travelling, which are all very relevant at the moment. So yeah, we'll just be a bit of an update and hopefully some of it might be helpful to people who are maybe thinking about an F3 year in the future. If you're new here, then my name's Jasmine and I'm currently working as an F3 doctor in the UK, which essentially means that I have completed my first 2 years of foundation training, F1 and F2, since graduating, and I'm currently taking a year out of formal training. So I am still working as a doctor, but also have some other plans which I'll go on to talk about more in this video. So a lot of the questions are about training, taking a year out of training, but the first question which I'll answer is, how are you? Which I thought was really sweet, so thank you for asking. I am good, thank you, and I hope you're doing really well too. I feel like this question is a massive one, especially because I've not been active for a while and not really kept you guys in the loop. But yeah, I'm good. I'm really excited to be going travelling, which is so soon now. Today, as I'm filming this video, is actually like my last full free day before I set off to go travelling. So today is my packing day. I've just like sorted out my travel insurance, my bank account and all of that. So very excited. And from a work point of view, I'm in a really good place with work. I'm feeling really positive about it. I've been working in paediatrics since August, which is when I finished my F2, and I've absolutely loved it, to be honest. And I'm feeling quite emotional about leaving to go travelling. My last day is on Friday this week, so I've only got 3 shifts left, which I'm actually really sad about. I am hoping to go back to the same department before hopefully getting into training, which I will also talk about. I feel like there's so much to catch up on. Yeah, I feel like both from a medicine point of view, like having gained a lot more experience since finishing foundation training and just becoming like more confident and seeing myself grow as a doctor has been really nice. Like now I don't have that pre-shift anxiety that I definitely did have before F1 and F2. Like yeah, I'm at a point where I just look forward to going to work most days and I'm really enjoying it. And we've got a really lovely team, which has been fab. So yeah, feeling really good from that point of view. I will talk a bit more about what kind of work I've done in F3 and how I went about arranging that. I'd say the last few months have been quite busy. So alongside working full time, I've also spent a lot of time on my portfolio for specialty training and my application and interview practice, which is only recently out of the way now. So it has been good and I do feel like I've achieved a few things, like I got a new publication, I've worked on a couple of presentations and things to build my portfolio, which is part of what I wanted to do in my F3 year. But I did find that those few months were quite go. Like I always had something else on my to-do list and it was a little bit non-stop, which is good in a lot of ways, but then also, yeah, I guess I have been busy, I have been kind of tired and just trying to juggle everything, but I feel like I'm at a good point to kind of pause all of that, be on the other side of having a full to-do list and being on the go for a while, ready to just switch off from that side of things. And I do feel like that will be a good reset and then I'll be able to come back kind of with a fresh mind and ready to get back into everything again. There's also a lot up in the air at the moment. Like I currently don't know if I'm getting into specialty training this year, which means I don't know where we'll be living, where we'll be settling, and what the rest of the year is going to entail. So yeah, all of that is at the back of my mind, but it is all very exciting. Next question is, did I apply for training last year? The answer is no, I didn't apply to training last year, but as I've mentioned, I have applied to training this year. I'd say I've pretty much always had the idea that I wanted to take an F3 year. I felt like it was the right time for me to jump off that treadmill a little bit, have a year with a bit more flexibility and still work as a doctor, but just do some other things as well before hopefully getting into a training program. The point I'm at as I'm filming this video is I've submitted my application, I've had my interview, and I'm currently just waiting for the outcome of that, which I find out in a few weeks. Next question is, how have you spent your F3 year? And I do feel all of these questions have a bit of overlap, so sorry if I'm repeating myself. So far, I've mainly been working. Like I said, I've been working in paediatrics since August, and that is in the same hospital that I did my F1 and F2 in. I have been working pretty much full time. I had a few weeks off in around October time when I went to India and went to Dubai, and then had a few weeks off over Christmas as well, which I was really fortunate to have and just spend time with my friends and family. But other than that, I have pretty much just been working. I've also just been working on some other projects kind of linked to my paediatric portfolio, so just continuing some projects from F2 like an audit, a QI, and recently got my first publication, which was exciting. So yeah, that was one thing I wanted to get from this year. And as I have already mentioned, I feel like I keep repeating myself, but I am going away next week. I'm going to Australia for 3 months traveling, which I absolutely can't wait for, and that was the main reason I did want to take an F3 this year. And I've not really got a set in stone plan for when I come back from traveling, but I think my plan, hopefully if there's work, is just to continue working in paediatrics, doing some locum work or just seeing what they have available before hopefully starting specialty training in September. But like I said, I am still waiting to find out the outcome of that. So yeah, I guess we're just waiting to see what happens. Next question is, how do you go about doing an F3 year? So people do spend their F3 years in very different ways, and I'd say the main categories are having flexible locum work, which can be ad hoc shifts or sometimes kind of full-time locum positions, having a contracted trust grade job in a particular department, having a contracted teaching fellow job, so some of which are purely teaching jobs, but some of them are split between teaching and like clinical work. Or of course, some people do go and work in places like Australia, New Zealand, or have a year out of doing things in medicine altogether. And I do think I actually have friends doing all of those things. The majority of my friends did take a year out this year, and people are doing all sorts of different things. I'm probably not the best person to ask in terms of arranging an F3 year in advance, so I was quite lucky that I actually fell into what I've been doing. So quite last minute, I ended up doing locum work in paediatrics, and I think that was only confirmed actually like a couple of days before I finished F2. Just one of the positions had become vacant, so I covered that as locum for a while, and then that job turned into a contracted trust grade post, which I am continuing until now. I didn't initially apply for trust grade jobs before finishing F2 because I knew I wouldn't be able to commit to a 12-month contract, which a lot of them were, because of other things I wanted to do in the year. But I did get quite lucky in the fact that I had conversations with people in my department, and then the contracted job I'm doing now, we kind of adjusted to make it work to the other plans that I had. So I've been really grateful for the team and everyone that's been involved in making that work out for me this year. The advice I'd give to anyone who's hoping to do an F3 year, especially if you're hoping to stay in the hospital you did F1 and F2 in, is to do what I did and talk to people in your department, say the rota coordinators, consultants, to make them aware of what your plans are and if you are taking an F3. I'd advise letting them know in advance, but also a bit closer to the time. So I think I'd initially emailed and put those feelers out around May time, but then it was only in August when I followed it up to see what work and what opportunities would be available that I then was confirmed that I could work in that department. So that is a bit more flexible, and I guess a little bit more risky in case things don't work out if you're looking for kind of last minute locum work. But if you are looking for kind of contracted trust grade jobs, I think they are all advertised on like the NHS websites and are put out quite far in advance. So if you're hoping for one of those positions, just keeping an eye out early, checking regularly, and having a CV and an application ready to submit if something comes up that you're interested in. I do also have friends who have gone to work abroad for a year in their F3, and I think people did arrange that in different ways. I know some particular places have a more formal application process similar to what we do here in the UK. So just doing your research and checking kind of when you need to apply and how that application process works. I do also know people who managed to find contacts, and it was more just kind of emailing people who worked at different hospitals abroad to get them in touch with the right people to be able to get those positions. If you are thinking about it, I think a lot of it is just researching, knowing who to contact, when to contact them. And I know it can be scary, especially if you're not guaranteed work, especially in advance. But for me, and I'd say for pretty much all of my friends who have done an F3, it did work out and people did manage to find work in the areas that they wanted to. Next one is another F3 question, and is, would you recommend doing an F3 year? And honestly, 100%. However, having said that, I do have friends who have gone straight into training post F2 and are also really enjoying that. So I think just different paths paths and different plans suit different people depending on what you're wanting to get out of the year. But if you're someone who's considering taking an F3 year, if you feel like it's something you would enjoy, and if you're worried about regretting not doing it, which is how I felt, then I would say absolutely go for it. I do feel that in this year so far, I have come a long way as a doctor, and I think there's been something really nice about being in a hospital that I'm already familiar with a team that I'm new. Yeah, I think it allowed me to get proper paediatric experience without the additional layers of having to get used to a new hospital, a new team, a new commute, for example, which are all things that inevitably come with training and absolutely, you know, make you grow, make you develop as a doctor and a person. But I've quite enjoyed being able to gain that experience whilst, I guess, being comfortable and not having to learn other things at the same time. And I do feel that that's prepared me a lot more for specialty training. I do feel at the point I go into ST1 now, I'll feel a lot more prepared and a lot more confident starting compared to if I went straight from F2. And I guess those are just my reflections on my experience as an F3, so I would definitely recommend it to anybody considering but just thinking about what might be best for you in the upcoming year. The next question is it hard feeling like you're behind when taking the F3 year? And this isn't something I've really felt to be a problem. It is something that crossed my mind when I decided not to apply for training last year, especially because I did have friends who were going into PEDS training, and I did think, you know, am I going to regret not doing that sooner? But I think a year is such a small amount of time in the scheme of like the bigger picture, and paediatrics training is 7 years, so 1 extra year is only a small proportion of that. I guess I've still been working as well, so that might change my perspective on it. Like, I've been working alongside other ST1s, and I guess we have the same amount of clinical experience. Like, it doesn't necessarily feel we're in different positions. Yes, I guess I'll become a consultant like later than other people, but it's not really been something I found to be a problem, and I think the benefits for myself of doing an F3 year outweigh any thoughts of like being behind. So if you're thinking of doing it, I don't think that should be something that holds you back. How did you get time off to travel? So I think I've probably explained this mostly already by talking about the nature of work that I've done, but essentially the position I'm currently working in finishes just before I go travelling. I did get quite lucky, but I do feel that's definitely a possibility if you have those conversations with your departments, if you are looking into more of a trust grade position. And of course, for people who are just working as locum for the full F3 year, it becomes a lot simpler because you can just pick when your shifts are. Is it feasible to afford to go travelling after foundation years? So I think this is quite a tricky question for me to give a broad answer to, because of course everyone's situations and responsibilities are completely different. Personally for me, I have found it manageable. I am funding all of my travelling myself, and I have saved over the last couple of years with this in mind, that I want to be able to afford to have a few months off work and go travelling. I am doing a big proportion of my travels in hostels and doing things a bit more affordably, which has helped out. But yeah, I personally have managed to save over my couple of years of foundation to be able to afford to have a bit of time off, which I'm really grateful for. I'm going to move on now to some questions more specialty training and paediatric focused. There were so many of these questions, so my thought is that if I get into training this year, then I'll make another video all about my experience with my application and preparing for interviews, but I'll answer some of the questions now that are less related to the application itself. So first one is, do you need exams for paediatrics training? So unlike other specialties where you do need to sit an exam in order to be able to apply, that's not the case in paediatrics. There are a few exams that you need to sit within paediatrics training, so that's 3 written papers and 1 clinical exam, but you don't need those to be able to start ST1. I have done my first couple of written papers, which I did in F2. I did mention these in my application and my interview, which may or may not have been helpful, but you definitely don't need it to be able to apply. I personally chose to do my exams in F2 when I was less than full-time on my anaesthetics job, so I had a lot more free time, and I felt I was at a point where I had the capacity to prepare for exams, and it was something I wanted to get done. So if you are someone who's maybe at a similar stage to me and you're thinking about doing the exams, I think my advice would be, if you have the time and you have the mental capacity to be able to prepare for the exams, and you're on perhaps a rotation that would suit that, then go for it. I actually quite enjoyed preparing for my exams in a weird kind of way. I know my friends always think I'm crazy for saying that. I did quite enjoy preparing for their exams, and I think because the content is solely on one specialty, and that's the specialty I want to go into, it gives you a bit more motivation to work not only for the exams but like for yourself as a doctor. But having said that, you know, F1 and F2 is busy. I think if I didn't have a rotation like anaesthetics where I had a bit more free time, my hours were less than some on-call rotas, then I probably would have struggled to prepare a bit more. So just go off how you feel and if you have the time to prepare. And next one is what to do to start building my paediatrics portfolio. Again, I'll talk about this a lot more if I get into training in another video, but I'll just give some pointers on things that you actually get credit for in the application and things to focus your energy on if you are new to starting a portfolio. My biggest piece of advice would be to have a look at the scoring criteria for applications, which does change a little bit year on year, but generally stays quite similar, and you can find that over on the RCPTH website. There are different sections of the initial application that you get points for, and depending how many points you get determines if you get to interview. Things that get you points and I would recommend doing for your portfolio are things like audits, quality improvement projects and research. And if you are perhaps a student or you're an F1 or F2 and haven't yet got much experience with things like that, then I would recommend just speaking to consultants and registrars in your department just to see what's going on and what projects you can get involved with. Another thing I'd advise is to really shoot your shot when going for things like presentations, posters and publications, as these are all things that are going to benefit your portfolio. So just have a look what's out there and try and get involved as much as you can. Another important thing for portfolio is having teaching experience, and there's so many different kinds of teaching experience. So whether that be getting involved with organised university teaching, bedside teaching, getting involved with simulation experience, or even creating your own teaching programme that you could deliver online or in person. There's lots of different opportunities out there. Whether you're a student or a doctor, most of the time you can get involved with all of these kinds of things. I think most, if not all, hospitals have an undergraduate like teaching department, so that's a good point of call if you want to see what opportunities are available. And even if you are still at university, often there are things like teaching societies and things you can get involved in to help teach earlier year students. I think the main thing I would say here is just make sure you're obtaining written feedback, both to be able to reflect and improve for the future, but also to keep for your portfolio. And I think a big other thing for your portfolio is keeping an actual portfolio of things you've done, of your clinical experiences and your reflections on those as well. So whether that's been things you've done, things you've witnessed or been involved in, keeping a log of that, of course, anonymously, and having some reflection there is really important. Again, both for your own development, but also when it comes to writing applications, a large part of the application is kind of reflecting on your experiences and how that makes you suitable for paediatrics. So by having logs of those things over the years and continuously reflecting your experience, that will help you when you come to applying. I am going to bring the video to a close there, as a lot of the remaining questions are more paediatric specific, which I'll put all into another video. Thank you so much for watching, and I guess it's just a little bit of an update of where I've been, what I've been up to and what my plans are, but I hope it might have been a little bit insightful for people thinking about taking an F3 or thinking what to do about training. So I'll see you guys in the next video, and stay tuned for any upcoming Australia vlogs.